4.6 Perform Integrated Change Control. Perform Integrated Change Control is the process of reviewing all change requests, approving changes and managing changes to deliverables, project documents and the project management plan, and communicating the decisions. This process reviews all requests for changes to project documents, deliverables or the project management plan and determines the resolution of the change requests. The key benefit of this process is that it allows for documented changes within the project to be considered in an integrated manner while addressing overall project risk, which often arises from changes made without consideration of the overall project objectives or plans. This process is performed throughout the project, and that's from the PMBOK Guide, page 113. It says, while addressing overall project risk, which often arises from changes made, I believe what they're trying to say is while addressing additions to overall project risk, which often arise from changes made without consideration of the overall project objectives or plans. And this makes sense because unauthorized changes to a project are a major cause of risks. The project manager is ultimately responsible for the Perform Integrated Change Management control process. The project manager may and probably will delegate a number of duties of this process to other team members, but the project manager can't delegate the responsibility. It reminds me of the transference risk management treatment, which we will cover later in project risk management process, of course. Transference is an attempt to give the risk to a third party, usually by outsourcing or insurance. In one of my classes, I was discussing reducing risks in the Perform Integrated Change Control process, and one of my students suggested that the project manager should transfer the risk to an experienced member of the project management team. That is incorrect because although the work could be transferred, the risk can't be because it actually belongs to the project manager. If the team member were more experienced in this area than the project manager, then delegating the work of a team member would reduce the risk, but that's mitigation. It doesn't remove it. And this process is conducted throughout the project right from the beginning, because as soon as the project starts and baselines are established, both product and project change requests, which can possibly impact on project management plan components or any project document, needs to go through change control. You don't need to use change control before the baselines have been established, and that's an important point for the exam. And changes can be requested by any stakeholder. The PMBOK Guide says the applied level of change control is dependent upon the application area, complexity of the specific project, contract requirements, and the context and environment in which the project is performed. What does this mean? Don't use a hammer to crack a nut. And likewise, don't try to pass a large change with a phone call. Not everything needs to be controlled, so how can you tell? In general, only the items in the configuration management system need to be controlled. This requires you to be careful when deciding what to include or exclude. And that's when you're planning your project. You also need to watch out for items added later in the project, and you need a process to decide if they need to be added to the configuration management system. Changes may be requested formally or informally, but you still need to record them somewhere because your requests are project records and need to be preserved. Whenever a change request may impact any of the project baselines, a formal integrated change control process is always required. Every documented change request needs to be either approved, deferred or rejected by a responsible individual, usually the project sponsor or the project manager. The responsible individual will be identified in the project management plan or by organizational procedures. And the plan may also identify changes that the project manager may not authorize to prevent a conflict of interest. For larger projects, the Perform Integrated Change Control process will almost certainly include a Change Control Board, and you usually see CCB for the acronym for that, although it may be called by a different name. ACCB is a formally chartered group which means it will have terms of reference, a set of policies and procedures, and the group is responsible for reviewing, evaluating, approving, deferring or rejecting changes to the project and for recording and communicating the outcome of the change request. If the customer or sponsor is not part of the CCB, then the outcome from the CCB may need their approval as well, and that's another important point for the examination. Perform integrated change control inputs. Number 1, project management plan. The project management plan components which we might need are the change management plan. The change management plan provides the direction for managing the change control process and documents the role and responsibilities of the Change Control Board, the CCB. The configuration management plan also ensures that everyone knows which version of the item is in operation. It may also be used to locate a previous release if an updated version fails after changing. Scope baseline. Schedule baseline and cost baseline are used to assess the impact of the changes in the project scope, schedule and cost. Number 2, project documents. Project documents that can be considered as inputs for this process include the basis of estimates. This indicates how the duration, cost and resource estimates were derived and can be used to calculate the impact of the change in time, budget and resources. Requirements traceability matrix to help assess the impact of the change on the project scope. Risk report. This represents information on sources of overall and individual project risk involved by the change requested. Number 3, work performance reports. Work performance reports of particular interest to the Perform integrated change control process include resource availability, schedule and cost data, earned value reports and burn up or burn down charts. Number 4, change requests. Many processes produce change requests as an output and may include corrective actions, preventative actions, defect repairs, as well as updates to formally controlled documents or deliverables to reflect modified or additional ideas of content. Please note for the exam an exception to the change control process. When proposed changes will affect only the performance against the baseline and not the baseline itself, then the project manager may make those changes directly. So I'll repeat that. When proposed changes will affect only the performance against the baseline and will not change the baseline itself, then the project manager may make those changes directly. Change requests that have an impact on the schedule baseline should normally include information about the cost of implementing the change, modifications in the schedule dates, resource requirements and risks, which is why it's called integrated change control, because it is across all these areas. And these changes should be approved by the CCB, the Change Control Board, if it exists, or by the sponsor or customer. And as I mentioned before, if the customer or sponsor is not part of the CCB, then the outcome from the CCB may need their approval as well, and that turns up in the examination from time to time. These changes should be approved by the CCB if it exists and by the customer or sponsor unless they are part of the CCB. And lastly, only approved changes should be incorporated into the revised baseline. Input number 5, enterprise environmental factors. The enterprise environmental factors that can influence the Perform integrated change control process include legal restrictions such as country or local regulations, government or industry standards, for example product standards, quality standards, safety standards and workmanship standards, legal and regulatory requirements and or constraints. Organizational governance framework, which is a structured way to provide control, direction and coordination through people, policies and processes to meet organizational strategic and organizational goals, and contracting and purchasing constraints. Number 6, organizational process assets. The organizational process assets that can influence the Perform integrated change control process include change control procedures, including the steps by which organisational standards, policies, plans, procedures or any project documentations may be modified and how any changes will be approved and validated. Procedures for approving and issuing change authorisations and configuration management knowledge base containing the versions and baselines of all official organisational standards, policies, procedures and any project documents. Perform integrated change control tools and techniques. Number 1, expert judgment. You probably could have guessed that one. And expertise should be considered from individuals or groups with specialised knowledge or training in any of the following topics. Technical knowledge of the industry in the focus area of the project. Legalisation and regulations. Legal and procurement. Configuration management and risk management. I don't know what the PMBOK guide means by legal and procurement. Perhaps I mean procurement and laws relating to procurement. It's just the wording's a bit strange, so I'm not absolutely certain. And number 2, change control tools. In order to facilitate configuration change management, manual or automated tools may be used. Please note the differences between configuration control and change control. This is very important for the examination. Configuration control is focused on the specification of both the deliverables and the processes. Change control is focused on identifying, documenting and approving or rejecting changes to the project documents, deliverables or baselines. Tools for configuration management activities should be able to identify a configuration item. If you can't uniquely identify something, then you can't control it. Imagine a library which doesn't use a Dewey Decimal Classification coded on the books. Record and report configuration item status. Perform configuration item verification and audit to ensure that project's configuration management is correct. If you can't prove it's correct, you may as well not have one. Tools should support the following change management activities. Identify changes, identifying and selecting a change item for processes or project documents. Document changes, documenting changes as a proper change request. Decide on changes, reviewing the changes, approving, rejecting, deferring or making any other decision about changes to the project documents, deliverables or baselines. Track changes, verifying that the changes are registered, assessed, approved and tracked and communicating final results to the stakeholders. Number 3, data analysis. Data analysis techniques that can be used for this process include alternatives analysis to assess the requested changes and decide which are accepted, rejected or need to be modified to be finally accepted. Cost-benefit analysis to help determine if the requested change is worth its associated cost. Every change costs something. In fact, even if you remove something from the scope of the project, it still costs something. The change that costs more than the benefit from doing it should be rejected. Number 4, decision making. Decision making techniques that can be used for this process include voting. This can help decide whether to accept, defer or reject change requests. Voting, as I've mentioned before, can take the form of unanimity. That's where everyone votes on something and it's only if everyone is in agreement it's selected. Majority, which means more than 50%, or plurality, the largest group. Autocratic decision making. In this decision making technique, one individual takes responsibility for making the decision for the entire group. Multi-criteria decision analysis. This uses a decision matrix to provide a systematic analytical approach to evaluate the requested changes according to a set of predefined criteria. Number 5 is meetings. Change control meetings are held with the Change Control Board, the CCB, that is responsible for meeting and reviewing the change requests and approving, rejecting or deferring change requests. The CCB may also review configuration management activities. The roles and responsibilities of those boards are clearly defined and agreed upon by the appropriate stakeholders and are documented in the change management plan. CCB decisions are documented and communicated to the stakeholders for information and follow-up actions, and that's from PMBOK Guide page 120. Perform integrated change control outputs. Number 1, approve change requests. Change requests are processed according to the change management plan by the project manager, CCB, or an assigned team member. Change requests may be approved, deferred, or rejected. Sometimes an important change request is rejected. Often the request can be modified in line with the feedback from the CCB and then resubmitted. The change management plan should have rules on resubmissions to prevent someone repeatedly submitting the same changes over and over again in the hope of wearing the CCB down or choosing a day when there's not enough people there to reject it. Approved change requests will be implemented through the direct and manage project work process. Deferred or rejected change requests are communicated to the person or group requesting the change. The outcome of all change requests are recorded in the change log as a project document update. Number 2, project management plan outputs. Any formally controlled component of the project management plan may be changed as a result of this process. Retrospective changes to baselines are not permitted. Only the most recent versions of baselines may be changed. This prevents people trying to change history. Number 3, project documents updated. The change log is normally updated as a result of this process to document the changes, but any formally controlled project document may be changed as a result of the process. Obviously, changes to informal documents will not be logged because they may be changed without a change request. And that's the end of the Perform Integrated Change Control process. The next process is 4.7, Close Project or Phase. It's also the last one of the Project Integration Management module. And so please read the corresponding chapter in the PMBOK Guide before watching the video.